At 2:14 a.m. on December the 25th, 2020, while most of the world was fast asleep after Christmas celebrations, the RQ-180 Sentinel, a shadowy high-tech asset linked to the CIA, moved in over Zulia, Venezuela, and wiped out infrastructure worth around $950 million connected to the Cartel of the Suns in what felt like an instant. But the most unsettling part was not the blast itself. What truly shocked observers was the total failure of the S-300VM system, long presented as the crown jewel of Russia's air defense technology. Even though it responded with urgency, it was powerless to stop what was happening. In the end, it could do nothing but watch as a single drone slipped through restricted airspace, carried out its mission, and vanished without leaving a clear radar trace. So how could one drone shut out the most sophisticated air defense network in South America and pass through without exposing itself? The answer begins with a mission profile that was never meant to be public. Now roll the clock back 120 minutes before the operation to a hidden staging area near Puerto Rico. There, the RQ-180 Sentinel, known among pilots as the Great White Bat, prepared to depart. This aircraft is considered one of the most secretive stealth drones ever built, designed with a tailless flying wing shape and coated in specialized radar-absorbing material. Few platforms on Earth are believed to have the ability to enter and survive in the world's most heavily defended no-go zones with that kind of confidence. But instead of taking the obvious route and flying at high altitude to stay out of radar range, it followed a far more dangerous plan, dropping to just 15 feet above the ocean surface. That is so low that, from the deck of a ship, a person might feel close enough to lock eyes with it. Why place such a valuable aircraft in that kind of risk? Because at that moment, the U.S. Navy relied on a survival principle known as emission control. The RQ-180 went fully silent. No radar, no radio chatter, no active transmissions of any kind. It navigated only through its inertial navigation system and preloaded terrain data, like a veteran moving through darkness without a light, because every step is already memorized. And that is where the real brilliance of the plan came in. At just 15 feet above the water, the drone's reflected radar return blended into the constant noise of the sea, a phenomenon known as sea clutter. On Venezuelan radar screens, it would have looked no different from the countless flickering returns produced by the waves themselves. In other words, it became a genuine ghost, sliding beneath the attention of some of the most expensive defense systems on the continent, while moving directly toward a $950 million target without setting off meaningful alarms. As the RQ-180 moved silently over the water, radar control stations in Venezuela remained wrapped in the calm of Christmas Eve. Operators were caught off guard, convinced that the layered S-300VM network could not be breached. But the Americans did not leave anything to chance, including the possibility that vigilance might still kick in at the wrong moment. To make sure the drone stayed protected, they added a diversion. At exactly 2 a.m., 14 minutes before the key moment, EA-18G, Growler electronic warfare aircraft operating from the carrier forward began a deception effort from a standoff range of roughly 100 to 120 nautical miles offshore. Using electronic spoofing, the Growlers fed misleading signals into the defense picture. They orbited safely outside the danger zone, transmitting carefully timed bursts designed to confuse and distract. Now picture yourself as a Venezuelan radar operator on duty that night. Your screens begin to behave strangely. Signals appear that seem important, then fade. Some tracks look real, others questionable. Your attention is pulled outward, toward the noise, while the real intruder stays low, quiet, and almost invisible, already moving toward its objective. Picture the moment. You are fighting sleep, dulled by exhaustion and maybe a little leftover Christmas cheer, when suddenly the radar screen flares to life. 20 targets appear at once, coming in from the south. In an instant, the S-300 system takes the bait. American electronic deception convinces it that a formation of FA-18S is charging in. The entire crew snaps awake. Under pressure, they react exactly as planned by the Americans. Every radar and every missile launcher swings south to engage the Phantom strike package, leaving the Zulia coastal approach wide open. And so, while Venezuela's air defense network was fully committed to battling electronic illusions in the south, the RQ-180 slipped in from the opposite direction, passing through the exposed gap without anyone realizing it had entered the most dangerous part of the battle space. The EA-18G Growlers, having done their job, cut their transmitters at once and banked away, turning back toward the carrier forward. But riding off Venezuela would be a serious mistake. Their crews had Russian training, and they were not the kind of operators who stayed confused for long. The moment two Su-30 Mk2s reached the coordinates of the supposed ghost formation in the south and found nothing but empty air, their commander understood the truth. They had been played. The response was immediate. The fighters snapped into a hard turn at high speed. Their pilot ordered the onboard radar, already being manipulated by American spoofing, switched off, then shifted to the OLS-30 IRST electro-optical tracking system. It was a sharp and dangerous decision. IRST sends out no signal. It does not search with radio waves. It hunts heat. The RQ-18O may have been almost invisible to radar, but it could not erase physics. Friction with the air still produced a thermal trace. With that in mind, the two Su-30 flankers reversed course and drove back towards Zulia in complete passive pursuit mode, scanning the darkness for the faintest heat signature. All they needed was one small glowing point in the night. If they found it, the CIA's billion-dollar drone could be gone before its operators even understood the threat. At the same time, directly above the objective, the RQ-180 was carrying out the cold, methodical work of a platform built for deep penetration surveillance. It banked slightly, opened its ventral sensor bay, and began the positive identification sequence. Its high-resolution infrared systems swept across the corrugated roof of the warehouse, examining what lay beneath, counting cargo containers, and confirming the heat signature linked to the submarine's engine. Now the entire situation became a race measured in seconds. The RQ-180 had to hold a steady line of sight long enough to confirm the target, while two Su-30S were closing in at extreme speed, their sensors locked on the possibility of a hidden intruder. And the chaos below only made the scene more intense. Out at sea, with 20 false tracks bearing down on them, the drug-running submarines panicked and pushed away from shore. At the same time, a 2,400-ton Guayquerí-class warship of the Venezuelan Navy cut through the water, activated its fire control radars, and trained its 76mm guns toward international waters in a clear show of force meant to shield the cargo. The signal was unmistakable. Touch this shipment, and the response will be immediate. The Guayquerí-class escort ship surged forward with the confidence of a crew that believed it controlled the entire chessboard. Its captain understood the gamble. He believed the United States would never fire first on a warship sailing under a sovereign flag, because that single move could turn a covert operation into an open international crisis. He was ready to play by ruthless rules, to ram approaching helicopters if necessary, and force a path through the chaos so the submarines could escape. But there was one thing he failed to consider. The United States didn't need to fire a single shot to take control of the situation. Out on the horizon, the massive USS Gerald R. Ford began a quiet but overwhelming show of force. This 100,000-ton warship didn't launch missiles or open fire. Instead, it made a sharp, deliberate turn, aligning its bow directly toward the Venezuelan vessel. Then it powered up its AN/SPY-6 radar to maximum output. To understand what that feels like, imagine standing in a dark alley, thinking you have control. And suddenly, a sniper's laser settles right between your eyes. No noise, no warning, just a silent message. One wrong move, and it's over. That's exactly what hit the Venezuelan crew. Inside the ship, every warning system erupted at once. Screens flashed with a single chilling message. Lock on. The captain froze. He knew what it meant. Being targeted by that radar wasn't just detection. It meant the entire Aegis combat system had already calculated multiple engagement solutions. And somewhere, a decision could be made in seconds. No threats were spoken over the radio. None were needed. The silence carried more weight than any warning. Under that pressure, confidence broke. The Guayquerí-class ship slowed, drifting on the waves, no longer pushing forward. The submarines were left on their own. With the surface situation under control, Venezuela's focus shifted outward, toward the naval standoff and the desperate search by the Su-30s. And that created the opening. Above Zulia, the airspace now belonged entirely to the Americans. At that exact moment, at around 20,000 feet, the RQ-180 received the signal it had been waiting for. The clock hit 2:04. The window opened. From beneath the drone, two small shapes separated and dropped into the darkness. But this wasn't about massive explosions or shockwaves. This was precision. Instead of heavy bombs, the platform released AGM-114R9X, often nicknamed the Ninja Bomb. It carries no large explosive charge. Instead, just before impact, it deploys a set of blades designed for highly targeted strikes. 58, 57, 56. The seconds ticked down. High above, one of the Venezuelan Su-30 pilots caught something unusual. A brief, unfamiliar heat trace cutting through his display. For a split second, something didn't feel right. But by the time his mind tried to make sense of it, the outcome was already sealed. There was no instant blast, no dramatic shockwave in the first second. Instead, the strike cut straight through the warehouse roof with chilling precision, hitting the laser-marked points below. The precursor chemical tanks and the lithium battery storage tied to the submarine operation. And that was the real setup. The warehouse itself was the explosive force. The R9X was only the trigger. Then, a heartbeat later, everything unraveled. A violent chain reaction ignited inside the facility, sending a strange green and purple fireball rising into the night. The unmistakable signature of burning industrial chemicals. In moments, the entire shipyard was swallowed by heat. Steel frames twisted, equipment collapsed, and nearly $950 million in assets disappeared in a single flash. But this is where the precision becomes almost unbelievable. Even as the target zone was consumed, nearby civilian buildings remained untouched. The University of Zulia and the church just 200 meters away were still standing. Even the church windows remained unbroken. The two Su-30s thundered overhead, but by then, there was nothing left to stop. Only smoke, flame, and the remains of what had been there less than a minute before. They had missed it by exactly 58 seconds. Back in Washington, the response was ice cold. No dramatic speeches, no official chest thumping. Just a quiet shrug from the Pentagon, as if this may have been nothing more than a tragic industrial accident caused by poor handling of dangerous materials. And that is what makes the operation so effective. The United States achieved its objective without sliding into a wider military confrontation. It did not need to crush an entire country or launch a full-scale campaign. It only needed to cut off the flow of money and turn a powerful network into a financial ruin. Offshore, the USS Gerald R. Ford remained in position, its radar still sweeping the horizon with calm authority. It no longer needed to do anything else. Its presence alone had become the message, a massive steel reminder to Venezuela and its Russian backers that this time the loss was financial. Next time, the consequences could be far more personal. The Americans won this round not by leveling a city, but by turning the S-300 air defense system, one of Russia's proudest exports, into a blind giant on Christmas Eve. They showed that real power is not always about noise, scale, or spectacle. Sometimes it is about how quietly and precisely you can strip your opponent of what matters most. So the next time some regime boasts about its sealed skies and untouchable airspace, take the claim with caution. By the time the warning appears, the real intruder may already be inside. And one more thing. This video is inspired by real events and reporting from major media sources, but it has been dramatized to help visualize how stealth systems, electronic warfare, and strategic deterrence can work in practice. Some details, especially timing and dialogue, are reconstructed through logical interpretation. The goal here is not just storytelling. It is to break down the logic of modern conflict and show that today's warfare is often decided by intelligence, deception, and timing far more than raw force. What is your take on a covert strike designed to stay deniable? Should Washington keep targeting the financial backbone of its rivals, or would a more direct military approach send a stronger message? Share your view in the comments and join the discussion.